Taking a peek at the infotainment system inside of the Chevy Trax. There are technically two different options that are available, so it's either this 11-inch screen or there's a smaller 8-inch one instead. Now, I personally haven't seen the 8-inch screen in person yet, but if I do a review video on that one, you'll find it down in the description of this video. But the functionality is the same between the two of them. So I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know. You've got your little icon tray along the side where you've got your audio, phone, traction control, vehicle information, and then a basic home screen. But one cool thing is that you can also customize the layout of these buttons. So you can do a little press and hold. Once it becomes loose, you can drag it up and down to create that perfect position for you. So if you prefer to have one or the other, you can adjust it. There's a little notification bar as well, letting you know if there are any current notifications available. You can swipe up, whether or not you've got an active data connection, current outside temperature, and then the current time. There's also this button where you can mute out the audio, or if you do a longer press and hold, it turns the screen into this little calming mode instead. And then just button press to bring it back to life again. And then you can adjust your volume using the rocker there. And then just in behind the steering wheel along the right side, there's also volume adjusting buttons there on top of that. For the media, you've got the option for AM, FM, SiriusXM, USB with MP3s on there. You could plug that in. There's also the option of adding in additional devices that have Bluetooth support. So you could hook your phone up if you want to for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. But one of the nice things is that you'd also have the flexibility of just hooking it up over Bluetooth if you wanted to make phone calls for audio and for things like that. And for phone calls and for music and things like that. So tons of different options that are available. You can push back there in order to get back to this screen. You can push this little icon in order to be able to go between different stations, but as you type, so let's say we're 97, these are the stations that are available. You can then do a button press there if you wanted to save it as a preset, and then just go, and you can see there the one that we've added in is now saved as a preset along the very bottom. So you can set them that way if you want to. You can cycle between all of your available stations based off of your geographic area there, and then same idea. So if you wanted to save another station in, all you can do is just push and hold any of the other options in order to be able to overwrite any of the saved ones. But there are a series of different presets that are available. It's actually pretty wild. And it's a mix of AM, FM, SiriusXM as well, which is nice. And then on the SiriusXM side of things, you can do this to type in a station if you want to, but you can also push this one in order to get to all of your different category views. So music, sports, news, talk, there are a ton of different options that are available. And then music, all of your substations that are available as well. And then if you click on any of these, it dives you in a little bit deeper. So to get to all of the available stations. It's pretty nice. From there, there's this little gear icon, and that's the same regardless of the audio source that you're currently in. So you push the little gear icon there in order to go to a few different things. So sound is going to be your sound settings where you can adjust your bass, mid-range, and your treble. Typically, I find that bass up a few points and treble up a few points in this vehicle tends to work really, really nicely. And then balance and fade. Do you want it focused just on the driver, people in the back seat, or do you want to reset it back to the center position instead? You can also manage your favorites. So you can see there all of the different presets that we currently have set up. You could delete any of these things if you want to. As you can see, it kind of creates this little hole. So if you wanted to adjust them, you can just do a push and hold there. And once it's loose, you can kind of drag it to any position that you want to. So it's nice that you've got the flexibility to not only manage your presets, but you can do so many other things with them. So you can adjust your presets out if you want to, you can rearrange them, you can delete them. There's radio text and then the radio categories as well. But you see there, the preset that we've added in is now gone. So that's the basics of adding in presets and the radio for the vehicle. Next up is going to be adding in a phone. So as of right now, there are no phones connected. In order to connect one, all you're going to do is hit Manage Phones. And then on your phone, you're going to open up Bluetooth, hitting Add Phone. And you're waiting for My Chevrolet to pull up. When it does, you're just going to hit My Chevrolet. Pins match up. So let's pair. Do you want to allow contacts and favorites to sync up? This is not my car, so I'm going to say no to that one. If it's yours, you'd obviously select yes there. And fully connected. You can look at some different options that are available, so you can disconnect or you can forget it. First to connect if there are multiple phones connected, which I'll show you in a minute. But you can also use wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with this thing. So do you want to use it? Yes, we're going to use CarPlay. And you just have to make sure that you enable there. And it's connecting through. Look at that. 3, 2, 1. We are fully connected, which is great. I love it. So it's not a full screen. Like, you can't override the side buttons there, but that's stretched nicely across the screen there. It's great. Along the top, you can see your basic information along with there. So you can see the current time, current connection level with your battery, which map was open last, which audio application was last opened, which miscellaneous application was last opened, and then you can push this to get to a little icon view or a little home screen view instead. So you've got the map that was open last, a basic search bar. If you had music playing, that would show up, and then your miscellaneous app there as well. So all sorts of things: Apple Maps, Google Maps, and Waze, all wirelessly. And they all work the same. So there's no pinch to zoom capabilities on the Apple CarPlay side of things, but let's see here. Yeah, it's the same. Google Maps, Apple Maps, and Waze, so no pinch to zoom capabilities at all. You'd have to zoom in and out this way. You can search for destinations, look at previous destinations, searching for addresses. Google Maps is the same idea. You can push the little gear icon on Google Maps to adjust your route options. So if you wanted to avoid highways, toll roads, ferries, look at map colors, you could do north up, adjust volume. So there are so many, you've got your 3 primary map applications that are available through the screen. And as you can see there, as you flip between a different application, it's going to override that one instead. It's pretty useful. And then audio applications, you've got music, there are podcasts that are available. If you have other apps, like I've got a library app installed, that's Hoopla. Live One is another radio app. So you've got a ton of different options that are available. You can push the little voice command prompt on the steering wheel if you wanted to activate your Siri Assistant too, which is great. And then on the phone, there's a little bit of flexibility here as well. So if you go into General Settings, CarPlay, and then you're going to look for your vehicle. So my Chevrolet, you can customize the display, toggle CarPlay off while the phone's locked, or forget it. We want to customize. So as you can see there, we've got the flexibility to just do a drag and drop. So let's say if you love your audiobooks and you are a fan of using Google Maps, you can drag and drop to adjust it, but you can also remove them as well. So it fully removes them from the screen, but it does save them along the bottom. So if you wanted to add it back in, you just push the little plus button there, and you can see they're all showing up again. But if you've adjusted it too much and you're not a fan of the look, on your phone, there's a little reset button along the top right. So you're going to push that to reset the layout back to the factory default screen there instead. So it's very straightforward. If you're on the home icons or the home screen there, you could then push CarPlay there to get back into CarPlay, or through the screen there, you can also push there to get back to your CarPlay screen, back to the icon view, back to the main view, or swipe across as necessary. It's pretty nice. It's good. And then settings, there are no additional settings for the phones, so we go to phones there. You've got the phone that's connected to CarPlay. Options, actually, I guess that would be a useful one. Turning CarPlay off. So if you don't want to have CarPlay running, it's literally just disconnected. So now you're strictly available for calling and for media. That's the basics of setting up Apple devices inside of the Chevy Trax. Setting up an Android is the exact same process. So if you weren't on the screen, you just hit the phone button there. And then same idea, same thing what we saw with the iPhone side. You're just going to hit the plus button there. And then you're looking for My Chevrolet and connecting through. PIN numbers match up, so let's pair and pair. And the phone is technically connected now for phone calls and for media. Do you want to allow access to contacts and messages? I'm going to say no there just because this isn't my vehicle, but you've now got wireless Android Auto. Same idea, you're going to connect enable, and then it's going to connect through. It'll take a second. Okay, Android Auto, select on your screen, and it should take a second to launch in. Boom. And you are fully connected there. Aha, love it. And one nice thing that I love about Android Auto is that maps are full pinch to zoom support, which is great. You can search for addresses, you can recenter yourself, you can push the little icon there in order to go between all of your different options. So things like route options, again, if you wanted to avoid highways, toll roads, motorways, and things like that. You can push this little icon to get a split view, or go into a little icon view there instead. And one thing, this phone does have Waze installed, but it's not showing up on the screen. I've put together a little walkthrough video explaining how to actually add Waze to Android Auto. You can find that down in the description of this video, but it's a very straightforward process. You can go back to your home screen there, and then if you wanted to get full screen maps, you just push Google Maps or Waze in that case, and it would stretch you across the full screen there. It's really nice. You know, very similar to the iPhone side of things, you can also push the voice command prompt on the steering wheel, if you wanted to activate your assistant, which is great. So the assistant will activate when you're hooked up through Android or iPhone devices with that steering wheel press. And then very similar to the Apple side of things, on the Android, if you search for Android Auto, you're going to connect through. I'm going to go to the home screen. I want to show you something here, to the icon view. So icon view there, you can customize the launcher, number of other things. You can turn off wireless Android Auto if you want to, but you can also, like I said, customize the launcher. So if you're not a fan of the layout there, all you're going to do is you can just do a drag and drop, very similar to what you saw on the iPhone side of things, but it's not dynamic the same way the iPhone side is. So you actually have to get out of Android Auto and disconnect and then reconnect in order for the changes to take into effect. So if you go into your, actually let's go home, settings, and then I'm just going to connect to the iPhone there. So let's just switch the phone out. If you didn't have multiple phones connected, you would just disconnect through options and then reconnect. So I'm just going to switch the phone back and should launch into Android Auto in a second. Perfect. And Android Auto launch through, and the changes that we've made are now in effect. So if you've made changes through Android Auto, they're not showing up. All you have to do is get out of Android Auto, reconnect, and you're set to go. And then hopping back home, you've got both phones. So you can connect to Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. You can't connect to both of them. And then through this, we're going to turn off Android Auto. And then you've got the option now of being the first to connect. So if you've got multiple phones connected to the vehicle, you can say first to connect. So it's who gets connection priority. So if you've got two phones connected, is it going to try to connect to one phone or the other first? But I mean, as you can see there, it's straightforward in order to be able to add these things in, and then deleting is equally as easy. You're just going to connect or click through and go forget phone, and it's forgotten the iPhone. And then can you swipe? Okay, let's just wait for that to go away. And options, let's completely forget the Galaxy there as well and forget. And there you go. So it's that simple setting up phones inside the vehicle. If you're running into issues with your Trax, so you can't connect to Bluetooth, like let's say if you're going through the settings there and My Chevrolet is not showing up on your Android or your iPhone, there are two things that you can do. So there's a reset option that's available. So you're going to press and hold this little button for about 10 seconds. You're going to turn the vehicle off, and then you're going to open and close the door and turn the vehicle back on. That might fix it. If it doesn't fix it, the only other option is to bring it into your dealer. So they're either going to apply a screen update, or they might have to replace the whole infotainment system. I get it, it's super frustrating if it happens, but if that press and hold of the hang up button doesn't work, then the only option from there is to have your dealer look at it, because they either need to force an update or they'll have to replace the screen. So I know it's frustrating, but that's really the only option that's available. Next up is going to be traction control. So traction control, you can turn these things off, and you've got traction control and electronic stability control. The only times you're really going to want to toggle these things off is in winter conditions, so slippery, snowy conditions. You're going to want to turn your traction control off, and that's to help the wheels spin a little bit more freely so that it's easier for you to be able to get through that snow. And then same idea, do you want to have your traction control on with electronic stability control on or off, etc. So, I mean, you can see there, turn it off to increase traction in sand, mud, snow, or icy conditions. And this thing is strictly available front wheel drive. So those are very, very useful. You've got this little icon, which is going to give you a few other options. So you've got your maintenance versus gauges versus your trip counter. So for your maintenance there, you can see basic information for KPA. You can have it set up for a bar as well. I'll show you how that one works in a second. Oil life, and then you can swipe across in order to get to your engine air filter on top of that. There are gauges that are available. So you've got your battery versus coolant, and then your different trip counters as well. So your trip 1, you can reset your trip 1 versus your 2 counter. And then when you click on show and cluster, it's kind of neat because it actually shows you what's going on right inside of the cluster screen there. And that's the same for all the different options. So let's say if you were on your gauges summary instead and you wanted to have your coolant temperature showing up inside of the cluster, you could do that. So it's kind of neat that you've got that flexibility. The cluster you can kind of customize a little bit as well, but if you want to walk through on how to customize the cluster, or if you wanted to use the steering wheel buttons and things like that, you'll find that walkthrough down in the description of this video. But there are a series of different options, like I said, trip counters, trip A versus trip B counter. I did a little bit of a longer drive inside of this thing, and I was getting like 6.3 liters per 100 and better. So, I mean, the fuel economy inside of the Trax is pretty solid. And same idea, you can show that inside of the cluster if you wanted to. That's the basics of that page. Outside of that, you've got your main home icon there, where We've got Android Auto, Apple CarPlay quick launches. There's some basics for climate control. There's some climate control settings down the center stack, but you can also adjust these things out. So, adjusting that way, that makes sense. All right, so you can adjust your fan speed that way. Do you want it going to your face or feet? Do you want to make it hotter or colder? You can toggle it on, auto mode, air conditioning, or circulation instead. Back home to a series of different settings that are available. So, settings right now, I was like, why is it on that as a default? Starting off with date and time. So you've got either that military time instead, so if you prefer the 24-hour mode or just basic 12-hour mode. Auto date and time is a useful one, and you can see that this is grayed out because I'm in auto date and time. So if you toggle that off, you can set it to your own unique setting if you'd like to. I personally just go this way instead, just because it goes based off of satellite. Moving back into language. So English, French, or Spanish are available for the language options there. And the languages that you get are going to be region specific. So I'm in North America, which is why you have those 3 primary languages. Phones, which we saw earlier, so you can go in there for additional phone settings once you're connected. Wi-Fi networks to connect the vehicle to different Wi-Fi networks that are available. And that's for things like updates and things like that. The vehicle can be used as a wireless hotspot if you want to. There is an active data plan that you do need to purchase in order to be able to use that. There's basic vehicle to phone sharing. Nothing exciting there. Display information gives you a few other options. So you can turn the display off this way. That's probably the more difficult way to do it. So just pushing and holding the button there turns it off, but it also gives you this nicer view, in my opinion anyways. But you can just turn the display off if you want to go that route. Sounds, so maximum volume at startup. So that's actually kind of neat because let's say if you had the volume cranked and then you turn your car off, when you turn it back on again, you may not want it cranked. So it's kind of nice that you can select how much you want the volume limited when you go to startup. So if your radio's playing, it's only going to go to a certain amount. And then touch feedback gives you a little bit of a sound there. So that might drive you nuts, so you could toggle that one off if you want to. So it's not a haptic feel, but it is just an audible sound. That's where we're looking for metrics. So you can either go US versus our basic Canadian, North American standard metric there instead. When you are adjusting your metrics out, it does adjust what's going on inside of the cluster screen as well. So you're going to go between either miles or kilometers per hour, depending on if you're in metric versus US. From there, you can update the vehicle. So if updates are available, it'll show basic information and then a few different reset options. So you can reset the vehicle settings, or you can erase the entire infotainment data. So reset vehicle settings, so if you set up basic things like presets and phones and things like that, versus erasing everything and then just bringing this thing back to a factory default instead. There are a series of different vehicle settings. Teen driver, if you've got a teen, it gives you the option of having certain limitations for the key fob. So you wouldn't be able to go past a certain speed, volume wouldn't work past a certain level, and a few other things. Rear seat reminder, if you've opened up the second row doors and then you turn the vehicle off, it's going to remind you to check the back seat to make sure you didn't forget somebody back there. Climate control, do you want it to defog, defrost? Those ones I just recommend keeping on high, or turning them on I should say. And then auto fan speed. So there is an auto mode down the center stack there. And then there are 3 different modes. So do you want the fan to blow low, medium, or high when you go into that auto mode? So collision detection, so some good safety settings there. Emergency braking, very useful. So if the vehicle determines that there's potentially going to be a collision, it can actively brake for you to either avoid or mitigate the loss. So essentially try to minimize the amount of damage that potentially will happen. Front pedestrian braking, same idea. If the vehicle recognizes there's a pedestrian in front of you, it can slam on the brakes for you. Adaptive cruise notifier, park assist, let's see here. And then just basic alerts. So there are some nice ones that are available there, but if you want a walkthrough, like the adaptive cruise is actually a really neat one. So I put together a little walkthrough video explaining the adaptive cruise system. You can find it down in the description of the video. And then basics, do you want to get notifications when you're changing lanes and things like that? So just basic safety alerts. Comfort and convenience, you've got chime volumes. So whenever you get an alert, what volume level do you want it to be at? And then auto wipe when you're in reverse. That's useful because if you've got your front wipers going and you go to shift yourself into reverse, it's automatically going to turn on that rear wiper for you as well. Some basics for lighting information. So vehicle lights, oh, that's a big one, exit lighting. So when you go to lock the vehicle, do the lamps just turn off, or do they stay on for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or 2 minutes? So you've got a few different options that are available there. Power door locks with varying settings. The big one here is going to be your auto door unlock. So when you go to unlock the vehicle using the fob, do all doors become unlocked, or is it just the driver's door? It's just useful from a safety perspective there. And then delayed locks as well as you go to drive. Remote lock, unlock and start. Unlock, when you go to unlock the vehicle, do you want to have the lighting on the outside let you know you've unlocked? Do you want to get a light and horn when you go to remote lock the vehicle? Do you want strictly a light or strictly a horn? And that's when you go to lock the vehicle, letting you know that the door is actually locked. And then remote door lock, which we've already seen. Passive door unlock. So as long as you've got the key fob on you, you'd be able to get into the door by hitting the button on the outside. Then there's also a key reminder as well. So if you go to leave the vehicle and you've left the key inside, it's going to chirp at you to let you know. And that's the basics there. Other one is going to be some basics for apps. So you've got audio, which we've already seen the audio settings there. Phone, which nothing overly exciting. Active call, do you want to show? How do you want to sort your contacts if your phone is connected? I personally only go through Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, so that's not as big of a deal. But if you strictly like to go over Bluetooth, you could adjust how these things are shown, specifically for your contacts. Like, do you want it to be first name or last name first instead? So I know that that's quite a little bit of information. The only other one is Wi-Fi hotspot, which we've covered off. You do have the option of using the vehicle as a wireless hotspot, but you do need a data plan in order for that to work. But I know that's quite a little bit of info, but I hope that answered all the questions that you might have about the infotainment system inside of the Chevy Trax.